Plato's dialogue Lysis is a thorough analysis of probably friendship, or for a lot of the dialogue, friendship. The important thing to keep in mind on our part is that the notions that Plato has Socrates and his interlocutors analyze in the dialogue, in their world and with their conceptual scheme, this doesn't necessarily entirely map completely onto our way of using words today. So for the most part, it is right, I think, to say that what they speak about is friendship and what it means to be a friend. But just keep this in mind. The Greek terms are philein, which is a verb meaning to love or to like. Then you have philia, which would be friendship. And there is the philos, which is the friend then. So this is sort of the terminology, or an important part of it. Again, it's worth looking at the dramatic setting at the outset, without going into too much detail on it. But do notice that again we are at a small palaestra, which is a wrestling ground, basically. Something that they had quite a few of in ancient Athens. Now, a bigger place, a proper gymnasium, would be something that required more space, but just to have room enough for a basic area in which to wrestle and a place to hang around and perhaps talk, you don't need so much space. So it's interesting to see in the opening that Socrates reports to us that he's going from the academy to the Lyceon, which means he's going from what then later in history was Plato's school, the place for Plato's school, to the place for Aristotle's school. But I don't think we should put too much speculation into that fact, as if there's some kind of movement between Plato and Aristotle here. I think we should just stop at the point of thinking of this as Socrates going from one training ground to another and then hitting upon a third one on the way. Actually, there's been quite a lot of speculation on his very idea of moving straight from one to the other, because it's difficult to make it fit with a map. But I think very roughly, and without making too much out of it, the academy is pretty far out of the city. It takes a while. You can visit today if you're in Athens, but it takes a while to walk down. Perhaps, if without too many obstructions, 20 to 30 minutes to walk from the academy in the north and down to the gates, the relevant gate going in to Athens proper. And what Socrates explains is that he's going down there and then he's following the wall instead of walking through the city center. Probably quicker and less of a harassment than walking through the city center. And somewhere there along that way, he's sort of caught up with some other people and brought into this tiny place, this small gym that it seems he didn't even know about, and there he finds the characters. So he's gone from one place where he's probably been having discussions about with young people and older people in a training ground, and he's going to another, and he's being stopped and enters a third one, a smaller one, and that's where the discussion happens. So the discussion, again, of course, the topic is friendship, and then it's relevant to see the relations between the people in the dialogue. Socrates comes in here, and there is a constellation here. The two young boys who are in a way the main characters are Menexenus and Lysis, after whom the dialogue is named. Now, they just are unproblematically young lads who are best friends. So in a way there is a dramatization of what it means in a sort of naive and everyday way to have a friend or to be a friend within as a framework for discussing what a friend is. Then there's this other guy who's also extremely relevant here in the discussion of these kinds of loving relationships. And that's the slightly older boy who's called Hypothales, who's also very much into the young Lysis, but where Menexenus and Lysis are more equal in age and just each other's best friend, this Hypothales is more like in love with Lysis. So if you remember the idea of of pederasty as a sort of educational institution, then this is one kind of probably quite clumsy and youthful example of something like that. So Hypothales himself is also quite young, but he is infatuated with Lysis, and I think Lysis, it seems, doesn't really enjoy this attention very much. And the form that attention takes is that Hypothales writes really bad poetry and has these declarations in public, etc. So it's you can see that it's a different kind of relationship, one that's not based on equality, and one that doesn't seem to be mutual, but that is very, very intense. Now keep this in mind when you consider the basic notions of philia, thought of as friendship, and the force of eros, which is important in some other dialogues of Plato. It seems that we here have, in this dialogue, very briefly sketched, very sort of light and youthful versions of those two relations somehow. So all of this is very significant because in the Greek landscape, you want to say something about friendship. This is the landscape and it's the place for it. So this being a so-called Socratic dialogue, as we've discussed before, that means that, at least on the surface, it's not easy to say that we are left at the end with a lot of positive results, like a list of theses or conclusions that are established. But what does happen is that we get to analyze things really quite well, and we're forced to think things through. Among the things that seem to be established, again, this is often this can also be questioned, of course. But one thing that's set up is that it's difficult to imagine friendship between the properly good if friendship has something to do with getting a benefit. Also, we know that the bad people, they can't have friendship because they're not even friends with themselves. So they can't enter into these relations. So what are we left with? And this is the closest we come to a definition in this text, is that friendship is, or the closest formulation we get is that you have that which is neither good nor bad, likes or loves that which is good. That seems to be the characterization. Again, keep in mind now things that Plato have hinted at via the dramatic level. Is this really what we find in the relationship between Lysis or Menexenus? And if not, is that because they are not really friends, or is it because there's something we're overlooking? Keep these things in mind. Now, in loving the good, there is, of course, the question of why the good should love one back. Because again, if something is good, that means that it is somehow self-sufficient, so it doesn't need anything. So whatever would be the motivation for someone who is good, or to the extent that he or she is good, to enter into this relation. If you have a relation like that, and it's problematic to think that what makes two people friends then are that they are good, or to the extent that they are good? Is it then because they are alike? So that's the basis of friendship? And here we see some of the wider vistas implicit in the Lysis. Because although a lot of the dialogue is about friendship, it's also about friendship and so on, friendship and hatred in some contexts, thought of as cosmic forces, as what explains the cosmos and the universe, even a natural phenomena. So here you have the questions that we also recognize from the natural philosophy of the time, asking about whether things get together, sort of love each other, when they are equal or when they are different, or whether they hate each other and dislike each other when they are equal or when they are different. So you can use different examples for different conclusions here, but it's certainly part of the framework for this discussion. The example of medical knowledge and medicine as a craft is also interesting in this respect, because it starts out from the doctor, that you can somehow love the doctor for the medicine that he or she possesses, which again is loved because it can provide you with health, a cure, and get health. So here we see in the example, not necessarily what is intended to be the final analysis of what friendship is all about, but we do see a clear picture here of how one model of thinking about why you like things in general. And so one feature of it is the kind of depersonalization, a depersonalization of the relation. Because although we start with the doctor, it turns out that the doctor is loved for the craft possessed by the doctor, and the craft in turn is loved for the results that it can bring about, namely health. So that's the first thing we get out of this, is the insight that we can analyze this in a way that is depersonalized. Secondly, we also get a reminder of a model that's clearly not entirely reciprocal. So the two parties here would not get the same, and they would not have the same qualities. Presumably, if you were the doctor yourself, then you could cure yourself and you wouldn't love the doctor, or you would perhaps love yourself qua doctor, yourself as doctor. So that's an important possible lesson from this example. Also, there is the idea of the first friend, or the first loved thing. In Greek, the proton philon, the first object of love or of liking. And this is, in this dialogue, it means that which makes you like or love the other things in turn. So in this medical example, the first friend, let's just call it that, the first friend would be health. That would be the ultimate motive in your loving the doctor for the knowledge, for health. It all ends up, the buck stops here at health. So that means that in that example, health would be the first friend. So that's the third lesson we get out of this analysis. Now at this point, of course, we can see that the theme has broadened so much that we are explaining, or at least forcing ourselves to analyze properly, what we might mean when we talk about friendship, but we are also forcing ourselves to think about what we mean when we speak about desire, about wanting something at all. And not least, we have entered also the area of eros, not just philia. So eros here is mentioned a few times towards the end of the text, and that is more the kind of possessive longing or desire that can be very much a one-way street, and which may be exemplified by young Hypothalamus in the dialogue. So if we were to provide some kind of evaluation of what happens and what seems to be the upshot of the Lysis, one might think that this is cynical. First of all, just thinking the very idea of a first friend kind of seems to mean that the person you thought was your friend isn't really, because it's not that person that you love. It's something that person can either be a means to, or perhaps at best exemplify, or partly somehow. It's not really the person. Well, maybe you could call this cynical, but keep two things in mind. First, this is just an analysis. This is not Plato saying that's what friendship is all about. It's us being forced as readers to press our thinking so that we can try to come up with what friendship might be if it isn't this, or perhaps we've identified something else at this point. So we can't really rush in and say that this is cynical. It's just an analysis, a suggestion for an analysis. And secondly, perhaps even more importantly, it fails. So it's clearly not the message, at least not unproblematically, it's not the message of the text, the Lysis, that this is the answer, this is the thing, because the conclusion of the dialogue is that, again, it's a variety of aporia. We didn't find the answer. So even in that sense, it couldn't be a claim at the end of this dialogue that this is what friendship is about. So keep these two things in mind if you feel you're getting impatient with the cynicism, the possible cynicism of the dialogue. Solutions or conclusions on a slightly different level perhaps are easier to say something sensible about. We have now found a model for describing perhaps kinds of friendship or aspects of friendship. And we have also been pressed to certain questions about its possible shortcomings. We've also ended up at a point where we've really seen the importance of asking whether friendship is based primarily or ultimately on similarity or on difference. So if you have two friends, what is the force here? If you analyze the relationship, is it something that they share, something that they have alike? Or is it a difference between them that means that each of them, for instance, goes for something that the other has that the first person doesn't have? Which one among the models is suitable for what relation? And what is it that we think friendship is? This is again important for the question of something being mutual. If you think of a friendship as not just being between two parties who are somehow alike, if you go to that option, that alternative, there's also the question of the possibility of there being something reciprocal and mutual in the relationship. What can this be? Now, the Lysis has set up a lot of the premises and it's set up a lot of the problems, but it has not served to us on a silver platter what might be the answer.